Snakes, frogs, and pollywogs. That's the story today on Hand It Down. I'm Cole Woolley, and I'd like to talk about the importance of AI in helping you illustrate your story. In this case, it's my story. So let me tell you about snakes, frogs, and pollywogs. In my storytelling, I created stories about when I was my youth at, let's say, 3 years old, all the way until I was 12 years old. I call it my Tryon Creek adventures because I lived in right next to Tryon Creek State Park, just outside of the suburbs between Portland and Lake Oswego in Oregon. And but before we lived near Tryon Creek, I lived in southeastern Beaverton. Most of you know Beaverton because of Nike. Well, before Beaverton became an industrial city, it was a small little town with an indoor swimming pool and a high school, and I lived there from the time I was about 1 year old until I was in third grade or 8 years old. So one of the stories that I have is snakes, frogs, and pollywogs. Do you think I had a cell phone in those days to capture pictures to illustrate my story? Do you think I had a cell phone in my pocket when I was 4 years old to document my adventures in Beaverton, Oregon, to find snakes, frogs, and pollywogs? No. Did I take photographs of the park nearby called Wonderland Park? We lived on Southeast King Boulevard. The park was just 100 yards away, 100 meters away. It was very close. We could go down there just about any day except for when it was raining hard. And just beyond that park was a field, somebody's old farm land. It was flat. It was L-shaped, a very large farm, probably about 150 acres. And it had a big barn on it. It was L-shaped. And for us, it was a playground. So we first discovered that the field contained these garter snakes. We sometimes called them garden snakes. We didn't know what to call them specifically, but they were just snakes. They could bite you, but there was no venom. And in this field, you can imagine with me, there was grass and flowers that would grow up when I was young to be as tall as me. And as I got older, then they seemed to be getting shorter and shorter. But they were about a meter tall or 3 feet tall. The grasses would grow that high. The flowers would grow that high. And imagine this was a playground. Besides the park that I had to play in, this was our playground. And we found snakes there. Well, what about the pollywogs and the frogs? Well, between the Wonderland Park and the big grassy field, or the big field as we called it, was a gravel road. And if we took a left and went on this gravel road, we eventually came to some natural ponds that had formed there next to the road. And these ponds had, in the springtime, pollywogs in them. So the frogs that would hibernate during the winter would come out and lay their eggs, and the eggs would be these big gelatinous masses that would float in the water. And after a couple of weeks, the individual egg sacs that formed them, that were part of the mass, would hatch, and a pollywog would come out. Well, imagine me as a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-year-old child looking at these polywogs in the water. They were fascinating. Well, I don't have a picture of these polywogs. I didn't take a camera with me. Back in those days, late 1950s, early 1960s, children didn't have cameras with them. Well, I can use AI to illustrate. Here's an AI illustration of polywogs. Well, polywogs, as they grow, they have a head and a long tail. And with time, there's, let's say after about 3 weeks, these feet start to form between the body and the tail. Hind feet first, and then some front feet. And the body becomes more elongated, and the tail starts to diminish. And a little frog starts to form from the pollywog. So imagine what it's like when there are thousands of polywogs in our little pond as we visit it every day. You see, I had 2 brothers, one just older than me named Mark, and a younger brother, 1 year younger than me, named Bert. And my mom would basically kick us out of the house, go play. We would go to Wonderland Park. I think she always thought we were at Wonderland Park, but we kept extending our boundaries of experience and adventures. And we eventually found the pollywog ponds. And we watched daily as these the thousands of polywogs morphed into little tiny frogs, and then eventually grew into larger frogs. Well, we would sometimes take a canning jar, and go collect polywogs at different stages of their life. We thought that we could take these polywogs and grow them in our house, and then we'd have our own frogs. Well, my mom would meet us at the door and say, "You take those polywogs back to the pond." So we would always do that. We eventually wanted to have the frogs in our backyard. So we had a fenced off backyard with some grass, and my dad had built a sandbox that was framed with 1x12s, and we had a lot of sand in there. And we thought, well, we'd love to have these frogs back here so we can play with frogs anytime. And that was the same idea we had with snakes. Can you imagine? There were times when we'd take a paper sack with us from the grocery store, and we'd collect all these garter snakes, small ones all the way to big ones. We tried to collect them in our pockets, but you can only keep so many snakes in your pocket at one time to take back and show your mom. Well, when we first tried taking them back in our pockets and showing Mom, "Hey, look at these snakes we found," Mom would say, you boys take those snakes back where they belong." So I remember several times where we'd collect the snakes in a paper bag, and I'd say we had maybe 100 to 150 snakes of all sizes. And we'd take them back and try and sneak them through the house, or sneak them into the backyard through the gate. And one time we were successful. Well, if we tried to sneak them through the house, my mom would just say, "You guys take those snakes back to the field." But we got smart enough to go through the side gate into the backyard, and we thought, oh yeah, we'll dump them into the sandbox. Well, as soon as we dumped them into the sandbox, they scattered in 360 directions. And we thought that, we would have these snakes in our yard, and that they would eat the frogs that we brought home from the pollywog ponds. Well, none of that seemed to happen. We'd go back in our backyard the next day, and we couldn't find a snake. Where did they go? The same thing happened with the frogs that we took back. We'd put them in the backyard, and in a day or two, we couldn't find any frogs. Well, AI can illustrate these experiences. I've used AI to create these slides of what it might have looked like when we dumped the snakes in the sandbox, or when we took a bag of frogs and dumped them outside on our grass, what they might look like after 3 or 4 minutes, and what the pollywog pond looked like. All these pollywogs in the pond, and another illustration of how pollywogs slowly change from pollywogs to frogs. Well, that's all done by AI now. So as you look back on your history and you want to tell a story, you can use AI to help you illustrate that story. It might not be a photograph that you took, because in those days we just didn't have photographs. But AI can help illustrate that. Maybe you don't have yourself in the picture, but you can illustrate it in almost realistic terms now. The realism it almost feels like you took a photo. And all it requires is you to be able to either get a subscription to an AI like GPT or Claude or Google, any kind of device that will help create pictures for you. You want illustrations, you want slides. You can create these by learning how to tell AI, I want a picture, a close-up picture of a number of pollywogs swimming around on the surface of slightly dirty water in a pond. That's all you have to say. And then push enter or an arrow or whatever it is, and AI can create that picture. If I simply say, I want you to show 150 garter snakes of various colors and various sizes being scattering from the center of a sandbox and going in all directions. If you say that, AI can create it for you. You see, AI is a useful tool, especially in illustrating stories. So now, with that illustration, I can take part of my chapter on snakes, frogs, and pollywogs, and I can create individual stories about the pollywogs, and individual stories about the frogs, and individual stories about snakes. For instance, I could tell a story about the two-headed snake that we found. I didn't realize it was a real anomaly. Well, we found a two-headed snake. We might have taken it home. I don't know. I still wish we had kept it. But now I can recreate it with AI's help. That's the value of AI in helping us tell stories. And I will discuss with you and explore the value of AI in illustrating your stories throughout these episodes here at Hand It Down, because your stories become their treasures.